BYD is the world's biggest manufacturer of electric vehicles. Now, that is mainly down to its success in its home country of China, but here in Europe, its presence is definitely growing. So far, we've seen the BYD Atto 3, the Dolphin and the Seal, and next up is the Seal U, and it's a bit different. Today, we're in Italy to drive it. Now, the main reason this is different from the other BYD products we've seen so far is because it's not fully electric. Well, it is actually. In China and in other parts of Europe, there will be a fully electric BYD Seal U, but in the UK, we're only taking a plug-in hybrid version. So that means it will have a petrol engine, an electric motor, and a battery, of course, and the official electric range of this car will be up to 78 miles. And did you know BYD built the first ever production plug-in hybrid back in 2008? So plug-in hybrid BYDs might be new to Europe, but they're certainly not new to the manufacturer itself. This car has already been on sale in China as the BYD Song, but over here in Europe, it's got the catchy name BYD Seal U DMI. The U stands for utility. DM is dual mode because it's a hybrid, it can be electric and it can run on petrol. And the I hasn't actually been explained to us. But the fact that it has Seal in the name gives you an indication that this is closely related to the regular BYD Seal. There are some differences though. Obviously that is a fully electric saloon. This is a plug-in hybrid SUV and the dimensions are actually quite different. This, for example, is quite a bit taller than the Seal, as you'd expect being a saloon. Now, elements of the exterior are familiar to the regular Seal electric saloon, but it's not just a copy and paste job from the design department. And it's a similar story inside, where it's not exactly the same as the Seal, but there are certainly bits that are familiar. For example, this massive 15.6-inch touchscreen infotainment system is what you find in the Seal. And like in that car, the software itself is snappy, it's responsive, it's got a reasonably complicated layout, and there are lots of different things you can do, but at least it responds quickly to your touch inputs. You also have a fantastic camera system with this car that gives you a brilliant array of different views around the car. Everything is very clear, very easy to use, and it makes parking very simple indeed. So that is excellent to have. What you can also do with this infotainment system is rotate it by 90 degrees, as you can in the Seal, and also in the Atto 3. Now, this does mean you can switch from landscape to portrait layouts if you prefer, but the annoying thing with it is if you're running Apple CarPlay and using something like Waze or Google Maps for your navigation, if you decide you want it in a portrait layout, then the screen will just cancel the smartphone mirroring because it can't support it in this layout. So that is a bit of a shame. Hopefully there'll be an update in the future to mean that it can manage it, but we've not heard anything about that so far. Anyway, elsewhere in this interior, really, it's pretty good. This is positioned towards the budget end of the plug-in hybrid market, but you wouldn't guess that that's the case from sitting in this thing. There's a good mix of materials around with some nice soft touch finishes. Even these plastics actually feel reasonably good quality, and it's certainly very solid throughout this interior. So this definitely isn't a cheap, tacky, nasty feeling interior. It's actually really impressive given the price, which we'll talk more about later on. It's also convenient when it comes to storage and practicality because you've got things like this nice softly padded supportive armrest, which underneath has this massive cubby hole down here. There's 2 cup holders in front of it, space for 2 wireless phone chargers at the top. And then underneath all this, you've got another storage compartment along with decently sized door bins. So all things considered, you get lots of equipment as standard. It doesn't change regardless of the trim level that you get. The infotainment system is reasonably impressive. You get a head-up display, you get a decent finish throughout this interior, and it's practical as well. So there's certainly a lot to like in here. Now, the wheelbase, which is the distance between the front and rear wheels, is actually shorter in the Seal U DMI than the regular saloon electric Seal. But that isn't a problem because you still have loads of room in these rear seats back here. Legroom for an adult is absolutely no problem at all. Very, very generous in fact. You've got some room just about for your feet under the seat in front of you when it's in its lowest position. And you've also got a really nice flat floor as well, which helps it also feel quite open and spacious, particularly if you're going to have someone sat in this middle seat here. In terms of headroom, even with this sunroof, pretty good, to be honest. The only slightly odd thing back here is the sitting position itself, because you can see this backrest is angled very, very far back. However, you can change that. Using the little tag down here, you can give yourself a more upright position. And there's actually quite a few different positions you can chuck this rear backrest in as well to find a comfortable position that suits you just fine. So, in terms of other plug-in hybrids, this is way more practical than a Mazda MX-30 in the rear seats, and it's actually quite similar to what's on offer in the back of the pretty practical Kia Sportage as well. The Seal U DMI gets a 425 litre boot, which in the plug-in hybrid world is about 100 litres behind what you get in the back of a Kia Sportage, but it's still more practical than the MX-30 REV and also the Kia Niro plug-in hybrid. The space itself in here is all pretty simple. You've got this extra storage bit in the back. You don't have it on the other side because that's where the speaker goes for this upgraded sound system, which again is standard. You also get a height adjustable boot floor, which sounds very useful, but this is its lowest setting, and this, ready, is its highest position. So you can see there really isn't much difference at all from the lowest to the highest. And it's also not like when it's as high as it will go, you're suddenly granted loads of extra underfloor storage, because there really isn't much of that at all. But in this highest position, you do have no loading lip at the front. You also, once you remove the parcel shelf and lower the rear seats, if you really want to increase the space, which you can do 60-40 as standard, then you can see in its highest position, this also gives you a flat floor from the boot to these lowered rear seats, which is quite useful. So in the plug-in hybrid world, there are certainly bigger, more practical boots than what this Seal U DMI offers. But still, the space that you're given is fairly practical. There are 3 different versions of this car that you can buy. The lineup starts with the Boost model, and despite its name, it's actually the slowest option in the lineup. So it is front-wheel drive. It gets a 1.5 litre 4-cylinder petrol engine with no turbocharger. It also gets an electric motor, and it also gets an 18.3 kilowatt-hour battery, giving it an official range of around 50 miles, which is very good. Then above that, there's a comfort model, and that gets the same basic setup, but with a bigger 26.6 kilowatt-hour battery. And that's the version that has an official range of up to 78 miles on pure electric power alone, which is really, really good. And significantly in the UK, it also puts it in quite a low company car tax bracket, certainly much lower than most of the rivals that this will be up against, and the rest of the Seal U DMI lineup as well. Then at the top of the range, you have the Seal U DMI design, and that gets an extra electric motor on the rear axle, making this 4-wheel drive. It also gets a turbocharger on its petrol engine. It can produce around 319 brake horsepower. The 0 to 62 miles an hour time is 5.9 seconds, but the range does drop a little bit to 43 miles because it has the smaller of the 2 batteries available. But still, all of those numbers for all of these different versions are really very impressive. No matter which version of the Seal you go for, the maximum charging speed that it can accept is 18 kilowatts. And that isn't particularly fast, but to be fair, among plug-in hybrids, fast charging speeds are still quite rare. There are some that can accept 50 kilowatts, but for the most part, they're designed to be plugged in and topped up slowly at home, perhaps even overnight, rather than diving into a motorway service station, spending loads of money for about 5 miles of real-world range. At its maximum speed, this can go from 30 to 80% in around 35 minutes or 55 minutes if you've got the bigger battery version in comfort models. And if you're charging from an 11 kilowatt home wallbox charger, then you'll get to 10 to 100% in around 2 hours. We haven't been given a 7 kilowatt home wallbox charging speed, but obviously it will be a little bit longer than that. And as standard, every Seal U DMI gets a vehicle to load function, which essentially lets you use an adapter to turn this into a power source. So you can plug in and charge up a laptop, or you can even boil a kettle. And what about the pricing? Well, when this first goes on sale in the UK, it will initially be available in 2 different trims. That's entry-level Boost and range-topping Design. Comfort will join the lineup later on in 2024 and sit in the middle of those 2 trims. And for the pricing that we know already, this looks very competitive indeed. It's not the cheapest plug-in hybrid out there, but it undercuts many of its closest rivals. And it also comes with loads of standard equipment. So you get things like heated and ventilated front seats, you get adaptive cruise control, you also get that fantastic camera setup inside. So it all looks very compelling. Now, if you're a little bit unsure of buying from a relatively unknown brand here in Europe, then it's also good to know that every BYD Seal U DMI comes with a 6-year warranty as standard, which is very good. Now, how does this all add up on the road? Well, this car definitely has some strengths in that department. Perhaps the best thing about it is the smoothness of the plug-in hybrid setup. So for a lot of the time you're traveling along on electric power, but when the engine does need to kick in, it does so very quietly and calmly. And in fact, a lot of the time you can hardly notice it happening at all. So it isn't the case that there's some really coarse, droning engine note in the background all the time. You can only really notice the engine if you are flat out accelerating very hard. And even then, it is a lot quieter than it is in most other plug-in hybrids, to be honest. The ride is a bit of a mixed bag. It's got a soft suspension setup and it feels quite floaty, but not always in a positive way. It's lacking a bit of body control. And it means that there are a lot of movements in this car, particularly because the suspension does seem quite reactive. But it's not really enough to make it uncomfortable. It is a shame though that it thumps pretty hard and is very unsettled by sharp imperfections on the road, like expansion joints and things like that. The knock-on effect of the soft suspension on the handling also means that this isn't some revelation dynamically in the plug-in hybrid class. There's quite a lot of body lean, and also this steering is very light and just robs you of any kind of sense of connection to the front wheels at faster speeds. But it does mean that around town this is really effortless to drive. It's also really impressively refined in here, even on the motorway. Now, £34,000 is still obviously a lot of money, and for most people, a plug-in hybrid is unlikely to make financial sense in the long run, and you might be better off using that budget to buy a regular fuel-powered car instead. But if you're a company car driver in the UK, or you simply have to have a plug-in hybrid, then this is decent on the road, nice up front, practical, very competitively priced. So the Seal U DMI might have a silly name, but it looks like a pretty sensible plug-in hybrid choice. Thanks very much for watching this review. If you want to see another one, then click up there. Make sure you subscribe to our channel as well. And if you want a great deal on your next car, click on that link to go to whatcar.com.